Hello, my name is Greg Madison, and this is The Living Process. This episode is a bit different because I'm the guest, and Mia Leijssen, very well known in the focusing world, um, professor of psychology and psychotherapy in Leuven. She is having a conversation with me where the spotlight is more on me and my, I guess, life story in terms of focusing and some of the things that are important to me. And yeah, I very much enjoyed the conversation with Mia. And I have to say, it was a little odd being on the other side. Um, and we spoke about sort of what spontaneously came up. Mia asked some really interesting questions, and we ended up talking about existentialism, focusing, the way that I see both of them coming together, um, a little bit about my experiences in working in a hospital, and some of the importance I place on kind of an existential process, an openness to life itself, and wanting to live from there. I think that's all I'll say. I hope you enjoy the episode with Mia and myself, The Living Process. Good morning, Mia.
Good morning, Greg. How special that you are the guest in your own series, the Living Process.
Yeah, I feel a little bit nervous to have the
Yeah,
table turned.
yeah, but I am very honored, and also I'm glad that you are in the spotlight today.
Thank you.
And I found it rather exciting because English is not my mother tongue, but I trust that the quality of our meeting is more important than my language skills.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
No. So um, I feel so rich by having read many of your publications, and I know that you feel passionate about different topics, focusing existential therapy, home, spirituality, politics. So, but maybe you can start with telling a little bit about your journey, especially into focusing and existential therapy, because as I understand, they really come together for you. And
Mhm.
that's also what I experience as your very special contribution to the field of therapeutic practice. And so does that feel as a good start for you to
Yeah,
tell a little bit about your journey into focusing and existential therapy?
sure.
Okay.
I anticipated you might ask about that.
Yes.
Um, to be honest, I maybe for many of us, but for me at least, questions like that, they become partly what were the facts and what is the story I tell about the facts. Um, as I remember it, I was a first year undergrad in psychology at the University of Alberta in Canada. And
Mm.
I had just this total luck that my honors supervisor, the professor in the department, knew Gentlin and
Oh.
was in contact with Gentlin because they had this shared interest in dreams and dream research.
Ah.
So he had the focusing book and he kept sort of, well, he kept wanting to focus with me.
Mm?
And I, I think partly because of my interests at the time, and I felt shy about that.
Mm.
But I got the book and read it and became very interested in it, partly as a research tool. I used focusing initially as a qualitative research method,
Mm.
but also because it felt to me like it was the first time I came across some kind of respected authority that said it was okay for me to actually be informed by and guided by my own sense of rightness.
Yes.
And I knew what he was talking about. I had that sense since being a child, but I also had the experience of constantly getting the message of don't pay attention to what's right for you, do what you're told.
Yeah. This is such an important insight that you can be informed by your own sense of rightness. And for you, that was even like a research tool as well. But
Mhm.
what touched me mostly was that you said it was being informed by your own sense of rightness.
Yeah,
That's such an important
yeah,
insight and a given also that you could receive that from
yeah.
focusing right from the beginning in your academic
Hmm.
journey.
It was definitely, I knew the feeling from the inside, but I also needed permission
Mm.
to kind of stand up for it. I would very quickly give up on what felt right for me, um, because I would often have the message around me of what theoretically was right or what, my parents said was right, what was the right way to behave. Um, so it was the first time Gendlin was enough of an authority that I thought, okay, I have somebody behind me
Yes. Yeah.
that says you have permission.
Mhm, mhm.
That did feel really powerful to me, especially at the beginning of my university training, to have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
something solid like that inside of me.
To meet another authority than those authorities you have met during your education, and
Exactly.
an authority with such a different message for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I just needed one.
But the powerful one.
Yeah, that's the thing. For some reason, I at least invested in him enough power that I thought I had someone that could stand up for me.
Mm, mm. Yeah. So this permission to stand up for what felt right for you,
Hmm.
that seems to me such an important gift
Hmm.
to receive. And maybe that's also what I recognize as one of the most important gifts of focusing, that you can own your authority
Hmm. Hmm.
with your bodily felt sense.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, for me, it was, I knew the feeling. I was aware of the feeling inside of me that would point me in one direction or another, or that would want me to say no to something.
Mhm.
I needed someone to give me permission to stand up for it and pay attention to it. But the interesting thing for me is at that time, um, after I felt somebody important says it's okay to do that, then I could begin to stand up for myself. It's then I didn't need him anymore. Like I needed that initially to come from the outside, and then I could have it on the inside.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Having it from the inside, like your bodily felt sense became your guide.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at that time in my life, it did. I was in a very for a few years, I was in a very luxurious position of being able to study and not having financial pressures on me.
Mm.
And I continued that for a few years, and it really, I really felt I could prioritize that sense
Mm.
of rightness on the inside. And I still think back to those years and feel like at some point I lost touch with that to that extent. And I still wonder about that, and I still kind of grieve that, and I still want it back. And I don't know exactly what happened, but I suspect it was partly the pressures of life. That now you have to look after yourself, Greg. You have to uh, finance your life somehow.
Yeah, and of course, we all are sensitive to what's the common sense of the community around us,
Yeah,
common sense in the theories
yeah.
we learn. So, of course, we are sensitive to that. And if there is nobody who tells you something different,
Hmm.
you start to hesitate
Yeah,
on what's your sense of living and what's your truth.
yeah, you're absolutely right. As soon as I left that somewhat protected early academic experience where I had a professor that knew focusing and I had another professor that knew existentialism, and it felt outside of myself there was a small community of people that even if they didn't understand me, they would tolerate me. There was an accepting space for me to be me in some
Mm,
way. But yeah, once I left that, I think you're right. I was entering the wider world and very different expectations of how to be.
mhm. And what I also find very remarkable in your work is that the existential theory and also the existential therapy, you developed quite a new way of approaching all these existential themes by adding
Hmm.
focusing to
Hmm.
that. So that's something I find quite unique also in your work, how you integrate
Hmm.
the, the common existential approach, which can be very theoretical, very intellectual,
Yes, exactly.
while you made it experiential.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
that was very important to me. Once I learned focusing before I learned existential therapy.
ah,
And I
oh, I
think,
didn't know that.
yeah, having it
Oh,
that way around, the focusing came
okay.
first.
Ah,
And
okay.
so it meant I was a very awkward student in many ways.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, everything had to come back to what resonates.
Mm,
So, and also the way that I would read existentialism, like if I would read Heidegger, the intellectual understanding wasn't what captivated me.
mm,
It was the experiential impact of what he was saying and being curious about like what is it in my body that's opening up when I read this, even though intellectually I don't really get it. Something
mhm,
in me feels excited or feels expansive or relieved or something.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So when I got into my existential training, there was initially a real effort on my part to have the experiential understanding of phenomenology to have that accepted. You know, the first response was you're doing a technique, which I wasn't doing. I wasn't teaching focusing. Um, but then it's interesting, some of those initial tutors that objected eventually came to a workshop that I was giving, eventually kind of learned a little bit more about focusing, and now really think it's, well, some of them at least, really think it's very important.
Yeah.
But yeah, initially it was, I had to somehow make it a seamless continuity.
Mhm. I also can imagine that at the start it must have been strange for you being at home in focusing,
Yeah.
and then in this existential world with much theory, much
Mhm.
intellectual stuff,
Yeah.
and you coming there with your
Yeah.
tendency to sense inside what's right for you,
Yeah.
how it resonates. That must be quite a new way of being in that kind of environment.
It was very confusing.
It was confusing, yes.
Yeah. There was
Okay.
a couple of years where I would go back and forth and I would sort of think I really need to drop focusing
Ah,
and get into the
oh,
existential. And then I get into the existential and I'd think I need to find my way back to focusing. This more top-down conceptual exploration isn't enough for me or doesn't fit for me. And there was a real confusing back and forth. And in my experience at that time and my experience with students, when focusing comes into contact with another approach, the other approach usually dominates for a
ah,
while because it's more substantial.
yes.
You know, there's more arguments for it or something, and the focusing kind of goes underground, at
Yeah.
least for a little while. That
Yeah.
happened.
That's a confusion and a struggle how to relate to that more strong,
Yeah.
yeah, way of thinking and being in the world, and then there you are with your more
Hmm.
fragile, but it's not really fragile. It's more subtle.
Yes,
Mm.
it's more subtle. It is robust in a particular way,
Yeah.
but it's also subtle and it's less certain. It's like when I'm sitting in the class, I don't have a good argument. What I do have is an uneasy feeling. And that's not quite as easy to present. It's like, but I know within that uneasy feeling there is an argument, but I can't make the argument yet.
Yes, and in that feeling is also an opening to the not knowing, and
Yes.
and that's where so much creativity comes from.
Hmm.
That's so different from adding old ideas, and so
Yeah, right.
the newness
Yeah,
comes from this quite uncertain sense that you don't know yet what's in there, but
yeah, you're right.
once you learn to trust it.
Yeah, yeah.
That was what I what touched me very much in your publications, your journey into learning to trust what was there inside in
Hmm.
you that was different from mainstream theories, mainstream values,
Hmm.
mainstream habits, all kind of things. So,
Yeah, that's true. And um, I like that you point out that there's creativity there. because I immediately then realize that, yeah, it opens me up to something that's more spontaneous and something that in the moment, if as you say, I trust it, then new ways of saying things come. And it's, I think, one of the reasons why I'm not comfortable with, although I see its value, I definitely do see its value, especially in conveying something, but I'm not comfortable with um, kind of lists of principles or guiding core conditions or even things like that, I immediately step back and say, oh yeah, I agree with all of that. And yet I'm not comfortable with it being formulated as quite so set in some way, quite so certain or something.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to follow a path
Hmm. Hmm.
that's not so certain,
Hmm.
but where you can discover something new.
Yeah. Yes. I I'm thinking I'm doing another interview later today for a different podcast that isn't a focusing one, but one that's interested in body approaches. And it does, yeah, I guess it takes some courage. I don't know, courage doesn't, I don't feel like I can rise to that word. That might be too
Okay,
big a word.
okay.
Um,
What would be a better word for you?
yeah. Um, it takes some almost, I was going to say a little bit of hope
Okay.
and a little bit of
Mhm.
almost sort of ignoring the fact that I'll be talking to people that will immediately want to go into the neuroscience of something, the neurobiology of something, and all of these set ways of seeing. And
Yeah.
I won't want to follow any of that. And I have
Mhm.
to kind of slightly ignore the initial feeling of being so inferior to such kind of certainty.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in some way, you have a sense that what they are doing is like a reductionistic
Yeah.
way
Hmm.
of thinking and um, giving reality words, but you feel this hope that you can broaden that
Hmm.
reductionistic theory or way of conceptualizing things. So
Well,
this hope is like you see an opening in these closed systems.
I hope for an opening.
You hope for it.
I don't necessarily see it yet, and that's where it's a little bit scary.
Okay.
And one way of hoping for the opening is I think of the person, the human being that's coming out with all of these different schemes and uh, strategies and all of this much more tangibly certain sort of ways of approaching. I try to make an appeal to them as a person and think that something's going on in their life that the need for certainty has become more pronounced. And is there some way that I can contact the way they know themselves, which probably, like me, is much less certain. And then if that's possible, then we're on common ground. And then we can both use our own language, knowing that we're both talking about really what it's like to be alive.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's more important to me than explaining life. I don't,
Yeah.
any explanation of life immediately feels flat and oppressive. And that's what I want to get out of.
Yeah. And there you have your huge experience that when you trust what it is to be alive, it seems that you can cope with uncertainty. That's so,
Hmm.
let's say, part of the human condition.
Yeah. Yes. For me, the struggle is in the face of such certainty, how I can lose myself.
Ah, oh yes.
Yeah, and feel like I need to present something that is
Mm.
equally solid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do
Yeah.
understand that
Yeah.
perfectly.
When in fact, if I do that, I immediately lose everything I want to say. And I'm playing a different game. And I know inside of myself, I've lost my own sense of authenticity. I've lost my own realness. And it's less interesting to me. I become bored with my own words.
Yeah. What you are saying now, that I think it's pitfall for all of us that we sometimes try to present
Mhm.
something that's equally solid.
Exactly.
I, I, I I can understand how this is in our focusing community also
Hmm.
continuous uh, stress we can have,
Hmm.
a continuous pitfall, I think, that
Yeah.
that we also can present something that's equally solid,
Hmm.
and then we lose something very precious
Yeah.
that we discovered.
Yeah,
And that,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're absolutely right. It's maybe it's something we don't talk about enough.
Hmm.
How as focusing people, like, you and I have been in the focusing world for a very long time, and many others have as well. But no matter how long you've been in the focusing world, there is this temptation or this pull, um, or at least the tension of how to talk not only to others outside of focusing, but also to each other inside of focusing. We can adopt a shorthand like some of Jentlin's terms, like carrying forward or interaction first or whatever. And they start to stand alone as terms that no longer have the underbelly of what they're actually referring to. And it's very easy to fall into that. And I was teaching just this last weekend and realized at a moment that I had fallen into something that I was trying to teach the opposite. And and how in retrospect, being able to own having fallen into something that is not the message of focusing and being able to show that the important thing is not to stay in some pure felt sensing mode, because that's not going to happen, but to be able to find yourself back there and to be able to be open and curious about what happened just there, what was going on for me really that I
Yeah,
wasn't paying attention to.
yeah. It's this really in the moment,
Hmm.
sensing what's alive in you,
Hmm.
even if there is so much stuff
Yeah.
above it that it can become suffocated.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if you have a way of doing that. I mean, I know that you've taught so much and presented, and I don't know if it's ever an issue for you.
Yes, it is an issue for me. Um, and it has, for me, it is also searching a balance
Hmm.
between connecting to where the other person is with all the certainties.
Yeah.
and my sense of, wait a moment, there's more. And feeling the search for making the connection and reaching
Mm-hmm.
this solid strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And there I am with my more fluid
Yeah.
process,
Mm-hmm.
at least recognizing that I want to reach these
Mm-hmm.
persons in this solid stage.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose the value of my more fluid
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. When you say it, I mean that's totally my wanting as well. Um, when you say it that way, what I realize is that if you can make the connection with the other person, that feels like then you have something tangible, something that isn't fixed and concluded, something that's alive, but also feels tangible. It's a reference point you can keep coming back to if you have that sense of connection.
Mhm. And maybe the other person becomes more open to what we have to offer about
Mm-hmm.
being in touch with the living forward that we can sense at a bodily felt level. I think these are moments that the other person is also confronted that he can't control everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A moment of being out of control of
Mm-hmm.
what life brings you.
Yeah.
Often that seems to be an opening to or a way of relating to that living process. Because I think that's what we have to offer. We have to offer a way of relating to a living process.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that does require letting go of trying to control. Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the grace or the relief of letting go of trying to control. Once you realize that letting go doesn't mean collapsing, um, then there's something better.
Mhm. That's also what in many of your publications touched me very much, the way you managed to stay with the human suffering, the very difficult conditions like facing the end of life,
Mm-hmm.
and how you just being yourself with your specific way of being was such a powerful, I can't say instrument, it's more like a powerful way of relating.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. It reminds me of when I worked in a hospital as a psychotherapist and offering focusing oriented sessions to people just on the wards and, in high dependency units and all over the hospital. Um, I learned a lot from that. I feel
Mhm.
like even though I don't always do it, I can still shy away from it, but I did learn the value of truth. of being able to tell the truth of my experience of being there with the other person. That
Mhm.
it was more helpful than trying to reassure them or trying to distract them or all the other kind of strategies.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah, very powerful encounters with people. I
yeah,
still remember them, decades later.
yeah. And as I understand, that give gives you trust in the living process.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly that. And I had to learn that over and over again because it's almost like surely that's not enough.
Yeah, that's the paradox I think we all experience, that we have to learn it time and time again.
Hmm.
Because in the living process, time and time again, we are confronted with new challenges and more than we already
Yeah,
cope with.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. For me, there's this implicit voice inside of me, like, can I bear this?
Mm.
Can I bear this truth? Can I bear this experience? Can I bear facing this myself because this other person is facing it? Or am I going to shy away and retreat?
Mhm. And when you ask, can I bear this?
Hmm.
I wonder what what did what did you discover
Hmm.
about your most important keys to bear?
Hmm. Hmm. Good question. As I say that, I remember specific instances.
Okay,
Um, and what happens, I get very bodily.
you get what?
I get very bodily. I get very down
Bodily.
in my body.
Okay, okay,
It's one
sorry.
aspect, but yeah,
Okay.
but not as a strategy, just as a consequence. It's like, oh my God, this person has just been told they're going to die, and 2 days before they were on the golf course, and just kind of taking that in. My body is what, I have no thinking that really is going to be. Everything seems totally frivolous in the face of that.
Mhm.
And so instead, I find myself kind of going thump down in my stomach, and that's helpful. But the thing
So,
that's,
as I understand, when you get very bodily,
yeah,
I can understand this. You turn to your ground of
yes,
being.
yeah, I don't even turn towards it. That would be more of a conscious.
Okay, but you're drawn into.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Almost like I fall into it and rediscover it. Um, partly because that's all that's left. It feels like, what this person is facing, it burns away all of the cheap, I don't know what the word is, the kind of this slightly facile and cheap sort of psychology and psychotherapeutic strategies. They all just disintegrate. And this is what I find. I find my stomach.
You fall into the most concrete reality.
Exactly that. Because that's what they're facing.
Yeah.
Their whole life has just disappeared. And I remember this one man who had just retired, very, very successful businessman, had,
Hmm.
had earned a lot of money and respect in his life, had just bought himself his own plane,
Hmm.
and he and his wife were planning all of these trips flying around Europe. And he collapsed on the golf course and woke up in hospital to be told that he had a brain tumor and probably had months to live.
He literally felt into a concrete bodily reality.
Absolutely, completely, exactly. And he was furious. He was furious at all the surgeons and consultants that treated him like a patient instead of a very important businessman.
Yes.
It's like his whole identity had, because he was in hospital, he was wearing a hospital gown, and everything that identified him as important was gone.
Of course, it is so frustrating
Oh,
when
yeah,
all the realities you think that were very important, just phew.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So he was, and this is common in the hospital. I would be called when someone was angry.
Ah,
The nursing
okay,
staff, yeah,
okay.
the nursing staff didn't want to deal with them. The doctors would avoid them. And so you call the therapist. And so I was somehow supposed to calm them or fix them or something. And I walked into the room and there was this guy, big man, older man, and really furious. And his attitude was kind of like, what the hell are you going to do for me?
Yeah,
And he started telling me his story of being in the hospital and then being told this news. And he was like, he was so angry. He was like, um, how would you feel? How would you feel? Like
yeah,
just like it was just such a bare appeal to me as a person. And I stopped and I thought like, well, how would I feel?
yeah. It's a
And
nice
I
question he asked.
yeah, yeah. And I just my whole body just felt like I collapsed into my body, like everything else was gone, but my physicality in that moment.
Mhm,
And I realized if my whole life was taken away from me like that, I would be devastated.
mhm.
And that's what I said to him. I said, I think I would feel totally devastated. And then we made contact.
Yeah. So by allowing your physicality in that moment, the connection between the two of you really was doing its work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I was really present to him. I was
Yeah,
not,
yeah, I
not
was
trying
thinking of
to
it,
avoid
present.
I wasn't trying to avoid his reality. I was trying actually to, again, that's a moment of can I bear actually taking his challenge seriously?
Mhm, mhm. Can I bear? And also, you mentioned the word presence.
Hmm.
Can you stay present
Yeah.
in his suffering?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. First of all, can I arrive and then can I stay?
Mhm,
Because when I entered that room initially, I don't know what state I was in, but I wasn't in that state.
mhm,
I was
mhm,
probably partly in a state of all the other things I had to do that day. And what am I facing here? How am I going to relate to this person? Am I going to have to go back to the nursing team and try to kind of sort
mhm.
out some of the misunderstandings or, what's going to be asked of me? So I arrived in that state.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had to find my presence.
And you are saying something like your capacity to stay with him at that level, how that was such a powerful
Mhm.
intervention, but
Mhm.
intervention isn't the right word. It's like it really is a powerful happening at that moment.
Yes. Yes, it was very, I mean, very very palpable. I mean, my body was just
Yeah,
vibrating.
yeah.
And also the other thing that helps me to bear it, I guess, is it's like my body expands. It's like somehow that room becomes my body, and my body isn't just my own physicality. A sense of
Mm-hmm.
it becoming a little bit, at least a little bit bigger.
Yeah. So in that experience, you also explain somewhat of what you call palpable,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
vibrating.
Hmm.
Your body expands.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah,
can you develop more on these ideas? Because this is also something we know from our experience,
yeah,
but that's so hard to put into words.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. As soon as you ask me that, I feel like I haven't gone very far into trying to describe it.
Mm,
One thing I can say, well, the first thing I want to say is that isn't always my response. Like on this last weekend, I didn't get there. I went into a smaller sense of myself and kind of didn't. So I don't want to pretend I can sort of find this or achieve this all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in this instance, when I think back to it,
Hmm.
part of what happens is, well, part of what gives me the confidence to be present
Hmm.
is that in that moment, I don't feel like I'm just myself anymore. It's not a confidence in myself.
No.
It feels much more like a confidence in reality or a confidence in life. That's the more existential, the really felt existential aspect of it in the moment is when my body expands, I feel like I'm in touch with the reality of existence. And then it doesn't matter. Then I feel like I can tell the truth. I feel like I can say, well, this is what it's like to be human, or this is what we face, or, that somehow it's a shared reality that's much larger than me. And that's what I have confidence in. My body knows that somehow. My body is a manifestation of that. Me as a person, that person that I would identify myself as biographically, that I don't have as much confidence in, except that that isn't separate from this larger. The
Hmm.
confidence is in the larger that I come from rather than the smaller that I am.
Yeah, yeah. As I understand you, you are expressing that in some moments, very particular moments that are about life and death,
Hmm.
that you come in touch with the reality of existence
Yeah,
that's much larger than you as this person, you as this individual,
exactly.
but that you have that sense how your body expands, and that seems to give you access to
Yeah,
so much more. It's more like you are ripped open to to something much bigger.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I get that sense sometimes with clients, and it doesn't have to be such an extreme situation.
Mhm. Mhm.
It can be just that I'm able to access that on a particular day. I'm able to just sort of relax into myself and then expand a little beyond myself. And it
Mhm.
is such a different um, experience of me.
Yeah. And as you also mentioned, we we are not in a continuous experience of that different
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Sometimes, and it can be in very different situations that, as you said, can also be in very daily
Yeah,
situations that you can
yeah,
come into that state.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But as you say that, I realize Elliott,
Elliott is trying to get your attention, or
Yes, he's no, he's interested in somebody that's in the garden coming to fix something.
okay, okay.
What what I
That's
want,
also a reality of
that's reality.
daily life.
Well, exactly. And it's like when you get an interruption like that, how do you find your way back? And what I need to do is I need to say to myself, you're pointing out that this kind of more expansive way of being can happen in daily life, but that it's not always there. And I want to say, I want it more often. I want to go back to those years when I had less uh, pressure from outside and I was able to live more from that state. I really want that more often again. I don't feel satisfied in kind of knowing that it's there, the tension of knowing it's there and not being there.
Mhm, mhm,
That doesn't feel satisfying enough.
mhm. At the same time, this is also the reality that our body is a relational process, and
Mhm.
we have all kind of responses to
Mhm.
all kind of situations, and just
My-
to acknowledge
yeah.
that there is this huge variety in our way of being with different situations, in how different situations have an impact on the way we relate to it also.
I think I can accept that. I think what I find more difficult to accept because it doesn't quite feel right is
Mhm.
uh, a relation. Well, I don't know. A relation. I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but I think a relation. Yeah, it is a relationship to myself that keeps me constrained when I could be more open to all of the varieties of interaction that you're describing. I feel like I know, it's not just I feel like I know there's a way of being more open than I am at times. And that it's it's almost physically distressing uh, to not be able to be more open more often.
So you are aware of situations where you tend to relate to yourself in a way that keeps you constrained.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. The world, and this is one thing I remember realizing when I was living more in a focusing state. The world actually gives me a lot more freedom than I think it does.
Mm.
It's not actually as constraining as I sometimes assume it is. And if I wait for the world to correct me, then I have actually a lot more freedom than I think I do. And I want to get back to that state where I'm not correcting myself. I'm waiting for the world to say, that's too much, Greg, or whatever. And then I can say,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, you're right. That was a little too much. Um,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
but to do it to myself is too limiting.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And it feels meaningful that I do that at times, not, not all the time, but
When you mention if I wait for the world, it, it reminds me of another topic that you developed in the last years. Is this what I would call you? You seem also to develop from the personal more to the community when you I've read an article of you uh, about politics and democracy, and
Yeah, yeah.
so that's there you are not waiting for the world. Yeah, I was touched by how you really are engaged in how focusing can also offer social change.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm very interested in that. Um, for me, the interest is if we stay consistent with a focusing approach and bring that to the political or organizational level, what does it look like? And one of the interests in that for me came out of the Brexit vote in the UK and how shocking that was, and how immediately when the vote went to leave the EU, I mean, I remember the morning after there was it was almost like being in a dream. It just felt so unreal.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone I knew was in deep shock. It's like, how could
Mm.
this be? And how can we stop it? And who were these idiots that voted to leave the EU? And it was like that attitude of like, immediately the people that voted to leave must be total idiots. And I felt that initially as well. I felt antagonistic towards them. They had voted to take away something that felt of deep value to me. And then I realized, hold on a second, what do I know from focusing?
Mhm, mhm,
And from focusing, I know that if I listen to someone, they become deeper in themselves. They become more of a person, and they always become real to me. If I listen to somebody, they become a real person. And I thought that's what we need really is to learn how to listen to one another. And that's when I started that campaign for a World Day of Listening, is thinking that what we need is not to call these people names and it's not to win with some other point of view. What we need instead is actually to listen to each other.
when you use the word to listen to each other, can you develop a little bit more on what is it specific for you,
Mhm.
this listening quality?
Well, in the political realm,
Mm-hmm.
it's an actual willingness to be open,
Uh-huh.
to
Okay.
listen, to listen without feeling like listening means you have to agree.
Okay. So
And
this is an important quality, the
mhm,
willingness to be open,
yes,
willingness to be open.
yeah. And that when I listen openly to someone that has a different perspective, a different point of view, I will be changed.
Mm-hmm.
My way of understanding the whole situation, my feeling about it all will change. I have to
Mm-hmm.
let go of trying to protect that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the not wanting to listen is partly a wanting to protect how it is for me and make that kind of permanent. Whereas listening makes it change.
And when I make the circle round where we started, I was wondering, do you have ideas about how we can make it possible that other people who don't understand anything about focusing,
Mhm.
how we can facilitate
Yeah.
their willingness
Mhm.
to be open to us?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that I have come to think that a way forward is to develop sort of listening societies. That a society where listening skills are a very basic citizen right or citizen ability or something. The ability to be a citizen means to be able to listen to your neighbors or to other citizens or whatever. If that's true, then I think sort of large scale listening training, not focusing training, but listening training, where people learn to sort of pause and reflect back and to actually want to hear more from the other person before they speak, before they have a turn to speak. Um, I think that can be taught, and I think that can be taught just to ordinary people that know nothing about psychology or philosophy or focusing. To teach focusing, I think, is more complicated, but I think people would implicitly learn focusing if they learn listening. But the
Yeah,
listening is
but
easier to teach.
isn't there a risk that even when you say we can train people to pause, to reflect back,
Mhm.
that still this bodily process is not incorporated in that?
I think it can be I think it has to be incorporated, but not as the primary focus, so to speak.
Okay, okay.
Like you would say to someone, before you try to listen to someone else, take a moment to just sort of take a deep breath, come into yourself, or maybe you would say come into your own body,
Okay.
and feel like there's a little bit of space there to just take in what the other person's going to say, even if you don't agree with them. That's the starting point. If you don't have that, it's really hard to listen. So that's almost implicitly teaching a little bit about focusing
Mm-hmm,
already.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think there would be ways of doing that. And
Yeah.
I would be curious to, it would be an experiment. I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I would say I think we have to do something because it's not okay the way our democracies are becoming incredibly polarized.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
everyone has to
mm-hmm.
take a side. It's like you're expected to take a side. And
Uh-huh.
if you don't take a side, then you're attacked by both sides
Yes, yes.
for not taking a side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some openness for both sides is not so easy to
No,
practice.
no, it's not popular. You end up being attacked
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
from both
Yeah,
sides.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I was wondering, Greg, we have already a conversation of nearly 1 hour.
Mhm.
So I really want to make space for what calls to you most
Mhm.
in this stage of your development.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting question. As you say that, I quite quickly sort of rifle through the different things that are important to me.
Uh-huh.
The two things that immediately feel most important. One is, and I was realizing this morning, this expectation inside of myself to be consistent in some way. That what I know from focusing, I don't want that not to also be in my way of organizing, my way of understanding politics, my way of doing therapy. It all needs to somehow be informed by what I know from focusing, because that feels to me like what I know from life in some way. And I don't want to jump into some other way of doing things that doesn't take into account what we know from focusing. So consistency really matters to me. The other thing is at this point in my life,
Wait a moment. Can I just
yeah,
check if I really understand you?
yeah,
that you, what calls to you is that what you know from your own experience from life, that you want to be consistent in
Yeah.
how you bring that into other places.
Yes. Well, I can say it better actually now that you've said that. It's
Okay?
that my body, I would almost say my body demands that.
Okay.
It demands that something that I know from the focusing experience, which is so fundamental to me, is present everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel the physical discomfort when I'm in a conversation where that's not there. I feel the physical discomfort when I'm in an institution that's hierarchical and not taking into account
Mm,
what we know from felt sensing and the fluidity, as you say, of that.
mm.
Yeah.
When you say my body demands that,
Mhm.
that's how I understand what in many traditions is called like a calling you
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and maybe the impact is slightly disruptive at times, but
Ah,
but it is a calling. You're right.
okay. So that was your first point.
Yeah.
And to my question, what really calls to you most in
Yeah.
this, your actual development?
At this point in my life, what calls to me most is imagining my death
Mhm. Okay. Okay.
and feeling like I need to prepare myself for the end of life. And that I shouldn't wait until I have a terminal diagnosis or something. I really, it needs to be a part of my living now that I'm coming towards the end. I mean, who knows? I might have 20 years or I might not, but probably not much more than that. And really realizing how incredibly short a human life is. You know, as humans, we don't live very long. You know, compared to a lot of things around us, our time on earth is short.
Mhm. So
And
this
yeah.
very existential theme of
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
and how to prepare yourself for that reality
Yes.
that this body
Mhm.
has an ending date.
Yeah, exactly. It has a
Yeah.
time limit.
Mhm. A time
Mhm.
limit, yeah. And what is what does that give you?
That's a good question. I partly it's I'm inviting a way of living now with that conscious awareness. So I don't know what that will give me, but I think it will give me a different sense of life for the last phase of life.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think it's also partly I want to be aware of my ending. I want somehow to be prepared enough. I guess it's like being with that man. It's like being prepared
Mhm.
enough to be present for when it happens and to witness, like witness saying goodbye to myself or, witness, you know, the final,
Mhm.
the final moments. I want to be there for it.
Yeah. When you say, I want to be aware of my ending, I can connect to that. That for me, being aware of my ending and some of the tragic incidences in my life that made it very concrete that that was near,
Mm.
or that how real it can be in everyone's life.
Yeah.
For me, that was like also the gift of being aware of what's essential
Hmm. Yeah,
and
exactly
no
that.
more worrying about so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
things
yeah,
that can distract me.
yeah, exactly, exactly. It is. It's going back, really paring everything down to the essential.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
that's paring everything down to the essential. I love that sentence.
It when you say it back to me, it's like it again, it feels like that state I found when I was with that man. It feels slightly more expansive. It feels very bodily. It feels very, very present. Um, I want to live, I really do want to live from there again. Not just be able to access it, but actually to be living from there as much as possible.
So if you mentioned that experience with that man, and if I ask you now, what what did you discover about the essential?
Hmm. Good question. I mean, there was many people like that. He's the one that jumped to mind.
Yeah.
Um, what did I discover? I can really, really see myself walking out of that room and walking down the ward back to my office in a totally different state. And it feels like the maturity of existence embodies me.
Mhm.
It's like there's something about existence that is very mature, very adult, very wise. And it's the experience of that embodying me. And knowing that I can jump up into my smaller self and be distracted by something superficial, but knowing also that there's this larger sense that can embody me.
Mm.
And just discovering that it's it calls to me,
Yeah.
definitely calls to me.
It lifts you out of your small ego concerns and all the roles in your life
Yeah,
and many
exactly.
superficial conversations.
Yeah, exactly that. And it also gives me an appreciation of that depth of being in others, even if they're not anywhere near that state.
Ah,
I somehow know that they also belong
okay, okay.
there.
So if I understand you, you are saying in such a situation like that with that man, you also come in touch with the larger sense that is embodied by that other person.
They may not be embodying it, but
Okay.
something about that larger sense of myself includes them. It's like they also have that capacity, and it also it makes me more likely to relate to that capacity in them rather than where they're at, where they,
Okay, okay. I
yeah,
see.
yeah,
Your restricted view
mhm,
of the
exactly.
problem
Yeah,
of the person
yeah,
also becomes much larger.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Like even on walking back to my office through the ward and bumping into nurses that I know or something, from that state, I would relate to the much more essential aspect of their being. And it's simpler. there's a simplicity. It feels much less complex.
Mhm. So when you mention from that state, somehow it seems as if with our experiential approach, we are continuous searching for a specific state that enlarge our sense of being, our sense of
Hmm.
what we know, what we
Yeah.
think, as if this is a state that enlarge
Hmm.
our sense of being. And
Exactly. It's as though the process of me implies that larger state. And it's not something that I have faith in or believe in or something. It's something I know. It's something I have been there. And I know when I'm there and I know when I'm not.
and as if that larger state, as if the cells in our body know that.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is there anything that you think is important that you would bring into this conversation before we finish this for today?
No, I think I'm a little surprised where it's gone.
So am I.
But yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I feel like I can let it stand. What we've talked about is feels satisfying to me.
Mhm.
How about you?
Uh, I found it intriguing, these interruptions, people ringing at your door, and and how you tried to answer to that reality, and at the same time how you were wonderful in just also keeping track with your process of being in this conversation.
Mhm.
So somehow I found it very great from you that you weren't distracted that much by these interruptions, and
Mhm.
so as if you are trained very well in going back to
Yeah.
where, yeah.
Yeah, I can usually find my way back fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that also partly goes back to the hospital experience where sometimes the only privacy we had was to pull a curtain around a bed and the cleaner would come in, you could see the mop coming under the curtain and it was like uh,
Yeah.
being able to realize that's not what's important right now.
Mm-hmm. As if these are the small instances of moments when you can bring yourself in that state
Hmm.
that isn't distracted so much from by all the
Hmm.
trivial things
Yeah.
that are there also.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just noticing the last thing I would say is I'm just noticing I know it was my word. I don't want to call it a state. That makes it
Okay,
sound too much like something that we should
okay,
achieve or something,
okay, okay.
and it isn't. I don't want it to become,
Yeah,
a goal.
yeah, I understand your point here.
Yeah. It's a way of experiencing life that I can't um achieve it. It's much more an undoing than an
Yeah,
achievement.
when you call it a state, it could be too fixed, but
Exactly.
it's so important that the living processes in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
So there we are back with the title of your series.
Yes.
A living process,
Yes.
not a living state.
No, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's an okay place to,
Yes, it is. It is.
yeah. Thank you very much, Mia. I'm grateful that you offered this.
Well, I really want to offer it to you because I feel so grateful of the work you are doing for the focusing community by making this possible, this project with your videos and
Mhm.
where you are spending so much time in interviewing all these people and making these videos available. So,
Mhm.
so I came out from my gratitude towards you that I really wanted the light on you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your gratitude and your
Mm, mm,
generosity.
mm.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you very much. And until we meet in person,
Bye.
bye for now. Yeah, bye.